Hey, Jim, welcome to this episode of the Virtual CMO Podcast. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Hey, well, thanks, Eric. Glad to be here.
This is great because you're going to be my first guest of 2021. It just seems like so much has been crazy this past year. Everybody's sort of looking out to this new year with a fresh outlook. And so I think you're a perfect guest to have on here. And, I'd love to start out just to give the audience a little bit of background in terms of you. I'd love to hear just a little bit about your journey to becoming an entrepreneur. Have you always had this bug of entrepreneurship?
I don't know if I have or not. I know my work ethic started when I was 6 years old. I guess that was entrepreneurship as well. My family, basically, we picked cotton.
Okay.
If you've ever picked cotton, you probably haven't, but it's
No, I can't say I have.
hard work. It's really hard work. We got paid 2 cents a pound, and a pound of cotton it takes a lot of cotton to weigh a pound. So, you could get a basket of cotton like this, you got maybe 3 pounds in it. So,
yes.
So as a 6-year-old, my target was always to try to pick enough to make $1 in a day. And I don't think I reached that until I was about 8. So that was my first work experience. And, the whole family had to go pick cotton, my brother and 2 sisters, mother, dad. And probably today they would have arrested my parents for child labor, but back then we had to have the money basically to eat and survive. So, but I learned from that working hard, physical work is not going to get you ahead in life. If you got to work with your own 2 hands, nothing wrong with that if that's something you want to do, but it's not going to get you ahead financially. So I kind of learned that deep down. And then my second job, I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, and my second job was working in a gas station pumping gas.
Okay.
And I got paid $1 an hour. And I worked 60 hours a week, no overtime. And I'll never forget, I took on $52.10 every week. And I worked hard, and I think I liked my job. I took pride in what I was doing. But again, I worked hard, but I knew that wasn't going to get me anywhere.
Yeah.
But deep in my mind, I'm thinking, if I could only get the job down the street in the factory. Working on the assembly line. That was kind of my dream job. And one day a fella came in pumping gas, and we got in a conversation. Long story short, he worked at the factory and he was a supervisor. And he said, "You should come and apply." And I said, "Well, it takes a high school diploma and I don't have one." He said, "I'm a supervisor. I'll pull some strings."
Okay.
Got hired, went to work there, 9,000 employees. And within 6 months, they rated you on an efficiency rating. They'd give you this job to do, and you had so much time to do it. We wired telephone switchboards, basically.
Okay.
And I was number 1 out of 9,000 employees.
Oh, well,
and I wasn't making any more money. My efficiency was 457%. So I was doing the job of 4.57 people. I'm going, okay, well, this is not getting me anywhere either. I could see my future was not there. But again, didn't know where to go. And the way my entrepreneurship started out, one night I was working a swing shift, got off at 12:30 in the morning, and a fellow walks up to me and he said, "Hey, Britt," he said, "you going to work here the rest of your life?" And I'm going, "Man, I don't know, maybe." And he said, "Come go to this meeting with me." He said, "I think it's something we could do to make some extra money." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "They just told me to come and bring somebody with me." And I said, "Well, I'm not your guy." I said, "Unless you could tell me what it is." He said, "I'll tell you what, you come with me to the meeting tomorrow night." And he said, "I'll buy the beer afterwards."
Oh, there
I
you
said,
go.
"Well, what time's the meeting?" So I went there for the beer, but I sat there and listened to a presentation. It was a direct selling company. And the second speaker, I'll never forget, he gets up and starts talking about how you make money in this business. And he wrote the figure $2,000 a month on the board, which really piqued my interest because that was wealth to me.
Sure.
And I sat up and took notice, and I started telling myself, I'm going to do this. Not only am I going to do it, I'm going to get rich doing it. And so the meeting was over. I found out it cost $4,000 to become one of their distributors. And I only had $9. So I ended up going to 23 banks and loan companies to borrow the money. And finally, the 23rd one loaned me the $4,000. And the next, I started business. I didn't know what to do. And the next year, I ended up losing everything I owned.
Oh, geez.
My home, my cars, my furniture, everything. I had a wife, a child, a notice on my door saying from the sheriff saying you got to be out in 5 days. And I had 15 cents in my pocket. And that was a turning point for me because somebody knocked on my door. I'm thinking it's probably a bill collector, but I had nothing to give them. So I opened the door and it was somebody from the company, and they spent 2 hours with me and taught me what I was doing wrong and what I needed to be doing. And my business took off like a rocket. And the next 12 months, I earned myself just shy of $1 million.
Oh my goodness.
It can tell you how fast things can turn around. So I got the entrepreneurial bug then.
Yes.
And during that year, even I started a second business based on the money I was earning from the first one. So both of them together made me almost $1 million. And I can't imagine now working for anybody. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 45 years or so.
That's so interesting to me because it was a bit of school of hard knocks in order to get you on that entrepreneurial path. And yet we've got so many guests that we have on this show who are aspiring entrepreneurs. And I'm sure you see a lot in your coaching practices as well, that they have a great idea, but they just don't know how to make money from it. It's not enough just to have a good idea, is it?
No, it's not. There's a lot of good ideas out there. And if you don't act upon it pretty quickly and figure out how to get it out to the public, somebody else is going to have it, because it seems like new ideas come and go pretty fast. Somebody else is going to invent something. So yeah, you've got to figure it out. And I think, people need, basically any entrepreneur needs PR, marketing, branding, and a way to generate leads. And if they don't have those four things, then to one degree or another, depends on the type of entrepreneur it is. But you just get left in the dust if you don't have those.
So do you remember back what was, or the one thing or the couple of things that when you were pulled aside and they said, this is what you're doing wrong, if you would do these things right, you could change your business? What were those things?
Yeah. And this is probably one of the best marketing tools I ever got. Actually, the best advice that I ever got. And the funny thing is, I don't even remember the person. I remember his first name, and I never saw him again. But he first asked me what I'd been doing, and I said, well, the training I got a year ago was your job is talking to people. If you talk a little, you'll learn a little. If you talk a lot, you'll learn a lot. I said, well, how much is a lot? He said 10 a day. I said, okay, I'll do the 10. So we didn't have any kind of tracking system or computers or anything else. So every morning I'd put 10 beans in my pocket and go out the door and talk to 10 people a day. And every time I'd talk to somebody, I'd flip a bean away. So that was my tracking system. And for a year, I did not miss a day talking to 10 people. Holidays, no exception. So I said, well, in the last year, I've talked to 3,650 people. He said, well, let me ask you a question. He says, how do you know if you have a viable prospect? I said, well, I guess if they buy from you. And he said, no. He said, how do you know if they're even going to buy from you? Even a possibility. And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, obviously you don't know. He said, you've been out there flapping your jaws for 12 months and you haven't made any money. So you got to be doing something wrong. He said, here's one key. He said, in order to have a viable prospect, you've got to arrive at 3 destinations. He said, number 1 is, do they have a pain or a problem?
Yep.
Number 2, do they want to solve it? And number 3, can you solve it? And he said, if they have a pain or a problem and they don't want to solve it, you don't have a prospect. And if they have one and they want to solve it, but you can't solve it, you don't have a prospect. So you got to have all 3 of those things. And I said, well, how do you know if they have a pain or a problem? And he said, well, it's certainly not what you've been doing. He said, you don't talk. He said, you need to ask questions. And I said, well, what kind of questions? He said, it really doesn't matter. I said, well, I'm confused. He said, you meet somebody new. You're at a party. You're on an airplane. You're at a coffee shop. He says, you meet somebody new and start a conversation. He said, what do you ask them? Do you live around here? What do you do for work? Are you married? Do you have kids? What do you do for fun? Whatever. Do you like fishing? He said, it doesn't matter. One question leads to something else. And that something else will lead to something else. And I said, well, why would I want to do all of that? He said, you're trying to find out what their pain is. I said, well, they're not just going to give me their pain. He said, yes, they will, if you ask enough questions. Do you like your job? No. That's a pain.
Definitely a pain.
All the money that you think you're worth? No, that's a pain. He said they've got 2 kids ready to go to college, and it's going to cost a lot of money. That's a pain. He said, everybody's got pains. And he said, you know what? They'll share it with you if you sincerely ask the question. So he said, I'm going to give you the key to success right here. He said, if you live your life this way, doesn't matter whether you're selling something or just living your life this way. Every time you meet somebody, always be thinking, what can I do to help this person? He said, not about selling them something, not about making money off of them or anything. It's just, what can you do to help this person? And he said, maybe it is that you're going to sell them something, but maybe it's not. Maybe you're going to give them a referral. Maybe you're going to help them out in some way. Maybe you've got a knowledge that would benefit them and their family or whatever. He said, always be thinking that. And quite frankly, that's what I've done for the last 45 years.
is practice those same principles.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's amazing because when I talk to my clients, these are the kinds of things that we go over and over again, because it seems like, although this isn't revolutionary in terms of this practice, you can pick up so many business books out there, right? And they will refer to similar kinds of concepts. Sure. So many people don't do it. Just before this call, I was going through some email that I had received from unsolicited email, and I had no idea why they were contacting me, but they were asking to schedule a call with me. They don't know what any of my pain points are. They don't know anything about it. They don't even know anything about my business, yet somehow they think they have something so great to offer that I should schedule time in my day to have a call with them.
Exactly.
And, this isn't a random thing that happens, right? This happens all the time. It's persistent. So I gather, what have you written? Is it like 15 books now?
15 books, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of these messages are the core to what you're talking about in these books.
They are. And even if you don't have direct contact with somebody and you're writing a sales piece or an ad or something like that, the same thing has to happen. You've got to get the client or the prospect to, in their own mind, to ask the question to themselves, basically.
Sure.
You've got to, if somebody's in a certain type of business, well, what are their potential pains? And I learned with general audiences that there's only about 6 problems in the whole world. And everybody thinks theirs is unique, but there's only a half a dozen. And so there's a billion people out there with the same problem. But it's really connecting with the people on a level that gets them to ask that question in their own mind, if you can't get in front of them and speak with them. And, I think the reason a lot of people don't accomplish what they set out to accomplish, I discovered, not only through my own experience, but experiences some very high-level people, very successful people that I've known over the years and still know, that there's a half a dozen things that is required, call them traits, whatever you want, but a half a dozen things required to accomplish anything you want to accomplish in life. And when you look at the things that you have accomplished, chances are you've used those 6 things. You might get by with 5 on some of them, but typically it takes all 6 things if you want to get ahead in a big way. And those things, number one, I mean, I look back at my first experience. Well, how many people would go and talk to 10 people a day for a year and get 3,650 people that told them no and not give up? Now, when I look back on that, I'm going, was I just stupid or what? I mean, here I am. I lost my home, my cars. I got 15 cents in my pocket and a wife and a child. I mean, who would go to that extreme? Now, I'm not saying that people need to go to that extreme.
Right.
But number one, first and foremost, that you have to have a desire to change if you want to change something. If you want something more in your life, whether it's money or a better relationship or better health or lose weight or whatever it is, these 6 things are required to accomplish that. That's number one. You've got to have a desire to change. So if you take money, for example, because we're speaking here to entrepreneurs primarily,
yes,
all entrepreneurs want to make money. I mean, that's the reason they're in business. So you could probably go ask 1,000 people on any street corner in any city in the world if they want to make more money. Successful people or not so successful. And every one of them will tell you yes, pretty much. But how many actually do? Maybe 5%, 10%, but there's about 90% that really have a problem with money. They have a problem with their relationship with money and how they see money. And it's not something they made up. It's something they were programmed with. So yeah, you can have a desire to change. And I had one. I mean, a burning desire to have something more than working in the factory. But the second step is so critical. And, I was taught back then to set goals and put up pictures on the wall of things I wanted to accomplish and all that kind of stuff. And vision boards, they didn't call them vision boards back then. I had notes on my ceiling so I could see them when I woke up in the morning. Well, nothing happened. Nothing happened. But you've got to have that second step, which is making a decision that doesn't allow for anything less than what you want to accomplish. See, desire is not enough.
Right.
It doesn't take you anywhere. You can desire all day long, but you've got to go to that next step, because a decision creates a mindset. It's a foundation that you build upon.
Yes.
If your decision is weak, it's like if you take a circle and leave a little opening at the top. Let's say this circle is a decision, but there's a little opening at the top. That's your exit. That's your excuse.
Sure.
And you can't have that with decisions. If you've got that opening, why even make it? Because you're going to exit. You're going to find some reason why it's not going to work. See, I made such a strong decision that night in that meeting that I wasn't about to exit. I mean, I saw where I could make some money and have a life that I wanted to live. So that decision, not only does it create a mindset, but it determines how you show up to the world. And even more importantly, how the world shows up to support you. See, you look at like the law of attraction. Yeah. I kind of see that, but again, it's been out there for many years. And how many people actually have gotten ahead using the law of attraction?
Good point.
You have to become attractive. And when you change, your view of the world changes. When you make a decision to do a certain thing, like you want to make more money. If you didn't want to make more money, why would you look for opportunities? If you want to make more money, then you make a decision to do it, and then opportunities show up in your viewpoint, and people show up to support you. Whatever it is you want to accomplish, it seems that if you've made a firm decision, it's like little miracles happen. People show up and you go, wow, I got this phone call, or I got this or that, so that's so important.
Well, I think it does make a lot of sense. And I think, this is sort of the burn the boats, right? You want to make a decision. You want to say that this is my goal. You want to make this promise to yourself, and you want to push ahead and say, this is what's going to happen, and change that mindset. But this often flies in the face of what I hear sometimes from aspiring entrepreneurs or small business owners that look at other people's success and they say, well, they just got lucky, or it was just good timing. And I think you've probably dealt with a whole lot more entrepreneurs than I have. That's rarely the case. Sometimes it plays into it, right? But there's usually a lot more to it than that.
Well, you create your luck and you create your timing. Everybody knows Tony Robbins, right?
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
Tony, I actually hired Tony and was his trainer. I trained him for his first 4 years in the business. So when I was business partners with Jim Rohn,
Yes.
and so he worked under my direction, and I never thought he would do what he's done. Never. I mean, because I knew Tony back then, but he was a kid. He was a young kid. But one thing he was really good at is learning things and applying them. And he would execute. And he was really good at selling. And you might say, well, great timing that he got on that infomercial. Well, if he hadn't had his ability to sell and sell himself, Guthrie Rinker would never have picked him up. And if it wasn't for Tony, Guthrie Rinker wouldn't be what they are today. So it was perfect timing for both of them, but they created the timing. And, it was a big break. I mean, Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yeah.
They've sold, 1 billion books or something.
Yeah.
Jack and Mark are friends of mine. And I was around when they created the first book. And then they tried to get 200 different publishers to publish it. Finally got one little publisher to take it on. And look what's happened. So
but from the outside, somebody might look at that and say, well, they just got lucky. Somebody picked it up and it sold, or Tony's done all that. Yeah, but there was all this work that went in behind the scenes before they ever got to that point.
Yeah, the biggest, people will, a good example, somebody's sitting in their office and they have a view of the elevator through their window. And this high level person comes in, whoever it might be, comes in, gets on the elevator, goes to the penthouse for their office. And every day they come in and they see them. They go, God, they've got their guards around them or something. He said, I'd like to meet that person. I really want to meet that person. I think that person got the answer to what I'm looking for. But they keep just looking and seeing the person getting on the elevator, up and down and up and down. So what are they supposed to do? Get on the elevator. If it takes all day long, sit on the elevator all day long until that person shows up if you want to meet them. That's what I call luck. Put yourself in the position of being lucky.
I think that's such great advice and so true, right? You want to make your own luck. You don't want to wait on the cosmos to sort of do it for you.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I think is interesting, you mentioned Tony, and obviously he is sort of a force of nature unto himself, but his company, Robbins Research International, is not, Tony's the figurehead of it, but there's a company under it. And you've got your own company, which is Jim Britt. You put your name on your company. How important do you think it is for business owners or aspiring entrepreneurs to have that strong personal brand?
Well, I think it depends on what they're doing. It may not be important with certain types of products or industries, but maybe the name of the product might be more important in some cases. But if you're marketing yourself, certainly it's more important. I know when I first started on the internet, I hired a guy by the name of Corey Rudel. He's no longer around, but Corey was a top expert in internet marketing. And the first thing he said was, you need to register your
name,
URL, personalgrowthtips.com.
Okay.
So I did, and the more I thought about it, I'm going, well, Personal Growth Tips is not my brand.
Yeah.
My brand is me.
Mm-hmm.
So luckily I went and registered jimbritt.com. And then there's another jimbritt.net and a bunch of other Jim Britts out there. But if I hadn't done it then I wouldn't have had that brand. So, or at least that .com brand. So I think it's important in a lot of cases for sure. It's marketing, it's branding. and co-branding. When I started in the speaking business, Jim Rohn was an unknown.
Sure.
He's passed away a few years back, but Jim became very, very famous. Probably one of the most quoted speakers out there.
For sure.
And a lot of other top name speakers gave Jim credit for helping them get where they are. But I knew intuitively I needed to brand myself with somebody else because I was a nobody. Who would want to hire me? I wasn't even that good when I started. I'm just trying to figure it out. So I branded myself by getting meeting people like Dennis Waitley and Og Mandino and Brian Tracy and Tom Hopkins and Earl Nightingale. And I mean, all of these top people. And I ended up on stages with all of them. So that was kind of a branding back then. I shared the platform with Earl Nightingale. I mean, who's even met Earl Nightingale?
Right.
To get to know him, or Og Mandino. I mean, so that was kind of how I branded myself, and and it worked. So
it's interesting because you've mentioned a few names throughout this interview today, and you've had the good fortune. I don't know whether you would call some of these people mentors or just peers, but there are obviously some points in your journey where you did get some clear mentorship. How important do you think that is for a business leader today or an entrepreneur? First of all, to find good mentorship or coaching and give back and be mentors to others who are, coming up along the way.
Well, I think it's important both ways, to have a mentor or a coach. I never really looked at Jim Rohn as my mentor.
Okay.
Now, Tony did. Tony, that was Tony's mentor, Jim Rohn. I just happened to be there training him on how to do the business. But, Jim, I think I learned from him, looking back on it, a lot of my style and what I do. I ask him a few questions. How do you become a good speaker? He said, well, you got to be able to tell stories. You got to be able to be passionate about the topics that you want to talk about. And I said, well, what kind of topics? He said, well, what are you passionate about? And I thought for a minute, and I said, goal setting, personal development, and attitude. And he said, okay, well, go study those three and become passionate about it. And he said, and never forget, he said, become a gatherer of stories. I said, well, where do you find stories? He said, they're everywhere. He said, they're in a newspaper. When you read it in the morning, you can come up with a story to tell. They're, your kids, there's stories to tell there. He said, you'll come up, if you just open up and listen, you'll come up with so many stories. It could be in the limo from the airport to the hotel. It could be the person behind the desk at the hotel. It could be the bellman at the door. He said, there's stories everywhere. And I took that to heart. And now I'm known as one of the best storytellers. So I gathered stories. In fact, I wrote a book. One of my 12th book was what I've learned from my 6 sons. And it's all stories that I've gathered and kept notes on over the years. So, and Jim had a very low key style.
Okay.
He wasn't a motivator. He just discussed things and had a unique way of presenting it. Well, that's kind of my style. I can sit on a bar stool for 4 hours in front of 5,000 people and never get up, where I know other people's got to go back and forth on the stage and different things that they do, which is fine. That's their style. But I have more of a conversational style that gets people to open up and listen. And I understand what people are going through. So I can kind of help tap into those emotions and feelings and what they're actually experiencing it, because I've probably experienced it.
Well, I love what you're saying there, because, it really ties in what you started out talking about, which is to really understand the people that you want to do business with. You have to listen. You have to be prepared to understand what they're going through, their pain points, their motivations, and whatnot. And one of the reasons, or one of the ways that you can do that, is by being empathetic to build trust and telling stories. I know when I go to a trade show, if we ever do those again, when you get up and you meet somebody and you introduce yourself or they introduce themselves, if you just sort of exchange names or where you're from, that's not a whole lot to hold on to, right? But if they would tell you a little story about their son who just had a skiing accident in Colorado or something like that, all of a sudden you would have more insight into them. You would have more connection with them because it came in the form of a story.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. Yeah.
And
You know, Jim's point was, he said, you know, if you tell a story and make a point, people will remember the story and the point. You just make the point, they're probably not going to remember it. So he said, either make the point, tell a story, or tell a story and make the point. And that's one of the things I learned from him. So I guess you would say Jim was probably my number one mentor, even though at that time I didn't think anything about it. Since then, I kind of, I don't know. I learn from all kinds of people. I watch people that are unsuccessful and learn from it. Because I think everybody is a mentor, or everybody's got something good to say, or you can learn from everybody. Everybody's a student and a teacher, or at least they should be. And some people teach and they don't even know they're teaching just from who they are. And like Jim Rohn used to say, he said, if you want to get rich, you can learn from poor people. He said, watch what they do and don't do it. Pretty simple. You know?
Very simple.
So anyway, back to the 6 things. The third thing you've got to do as an entrepreneur, especially after you've made that decision, you got to take action. You know, you've got to step up and take action. And there's so many people that they want to start a business and they decide to do it, and then they're getting ready to get going. They got to have all of this stuff. It takes them months to put all this stuff together. Well, maybe a lot of that's important, but what can you do?
Business cards, creating the logos, all that kind of stuff, right?
What can you do right now today that will move you forward? That's the key. You got to take action, even if it's small steps. And, you know, somebody says, well, I don't have a business card. Well, so what? Become memorable without it. You know, write it down on a piece of paper, whatever it is. You keep moving forward. That's key to, you know, being an entrepreneur. You got to learn to shoot from the hip. You know, you can't keep getting ready to get going. To me, that's in part, it's an excuse for not getting going. You know,
so true. Action is important.
You're not going to succeed. So they think if I just do all of this stuff and get everything ready, you know, it's like somebody going out and being certified to become a coach. I spoke with somebody just the other day that spent $10,000 getting certified. And I said, well, what's your marketing budget? I'm broke. I said, well, should have thought.
How's everybody going to know about that? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how are you going to market yourself? I don't know. Yeah. And that's a problem. It's not that they're not good at what they do. It's you got to have the full package. And you got to figure out some way. In a direct sales business, somebody goes, well, what do I do to start? I said, pick up your cell phone. And if you've got 500 people in there, start calling them.
Yeah.
Call all 500 of them in a week. I said, that'll get your business up and running. So it's taking action instead of waiting. So that's number 3. And number 4 is critical too. And I think 4 and 5 kind of go together in some ways. But you got to be bold in today's marketplace.
Yes.
You've got to step up and take center stage, step into the spotlight, because it's not going to find you. So if you look at Tony, I mean, what Tony's done over the years is just amazing. And he just keeps going, man. I mean, nothing is going to stop him. I mean, look at what he's done with online seminars now.
Oh, it's crazy.
The guy gets 20,000 people on an online program for $1,000 a head, and he's got this incredible room that he set up. Yeah, the average person couldn't do that. It probably cost him a couple $1 million to set that up.
I'm sure.
But I mean, he just doesn't stop.
No.
And he may have found a better way to even go present seminars. Now he doesn't have to go travel anywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
It's but that's what you've got to do. You got to be bold.
I love that.
It's just critical in today's marketplace, which brings up the next topic, or the next trait. is you got to be willing to experience some pain.
Mm.
You're going to get ahead in life. You know, my philosophy is that every income level and every life level requires a different you. And if you're not willing to experience some pain to discover that new you, you'll probably end up staying right where you are. So you've got to be willing to step out of that comfort zone. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, well, what was your biggest one? I said, well, you know, the first year, I only knew like 9 people in the factory and a few neighbors. So was it uncomfortable for me to go out and talk to 10 people every day for a year? Yeah, it was uncomfortable. And now people say, well, how do you handle rejection now? And I said, I did that when I was 22 years old.
So you learned all about rejection then.
It's I got all of it.
Yeah.
So, but it was uncomfortable. Every person I talked to, for the most part, was uncomfortable. But you know what I learned from that? One of the best years of my life. I learned how to talk to people. I learned how to meet strangers. I learned how to be bold. I learned how to step out of my comfort zone. I learned how to create stuff. If I couldn't find somebody to talk to, I pick up the phone and dial a wrong number, you know, anything to succeed, you know? So,
and this is before the days of LinkedIn, in-mails and other things. It was either in person or on the phone, right?
That was it, man. I mean, that was it. So, but that question they asked me, what was the biggest fear that you had of stepping out of your comfort zone? I said, public speaking.
Yeah.
Was my biggest fear. I mean, my first talk I did, I got kind of hooked into it by accident, and it was only for about 30 people.
Okay.
A fellow booked me into it, one of my salespeople with Jim Rohn. And I was scared to death. For months, I was scared to death. Right up to the time that I was getting ready to go do the talk, I was in the hotel. I couldn't sleep. I didn't sleep all night. I was trying to figure out, how do I get out of this?
Yep.
And I couldn't come up with anything until about 7 o'clock that morning. I'm going, you know, I'm going to go have an accident in my car. So I could, not a bad one, just, you know, a fender bender of some kind. So I could point at it and say, that's why I was late. I had an accident.
Okay. And
I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I was actually going to go do that. Looking back on it, I think that's pretty stupid, but I was scared. I was scared. And I had notes. I mean, I'd written notes on what I was going to talk about. I probably had that many notes, probably enough to talk for 10 days now. And that morning, I'd getting ready to leave, and somebody knocks on my hotel door. Open the door thinking it's probably room service or the cleaning. And it was the guy that booked me into the talk. Okay. And he said, I came to pick you up. Huh. And I'm going, well, I'll drive. And he said, no, I'll drive. And I said, well, I really want to drive. And he said, I'm parked in front of the door. Come on. I'm going, okay, now do I grab the wheel while he's driving, or what do I do?
How do I get out of this?
And I couldn't get out of it. So I ended up doing the talk, and I don't remember what I said. I have no idea. All I remember is I couldn't see the people. It was like I was blinded by fear. And at the end of it, they clapped, and I couldn't wait to get outside. So I walk outside waiting on my friend that booked me in there. And I thought, never again will I ever put myself in a position to feel like that. Never again. So I thought for a little bit longer, and I'm going, well, Jim Britt, you've got one of two choices. Never do it again, or do it often until you get better at it. And the first one occurred to me, never do it again. But then I thought about it a little bit, and I'm going, okay, I'm just going to have to push myself.
Yeah.
And so I went back, and over the next 30 days, I announced to over 300 salespeople that we had that I would do presentations for them, like I did for this guy. I would do presentations for them as long as there were 50 people, and I'd do up to 3 a day. And I averaged 3 a day for the next 5 years.
Wow.
So
talk about overcoming that fear, right?
Yeah. But you know what? At the end of 5 years, I'd done a lot of other seminars and things too, but I was still afraid. And I'll never never forget when I kind of got what people are looking for, and I got what holds them back in life. And I will never forget walking in to the back of the room in Park City, Utah, opening the doors. There's about 400 people waiting for me. And my first thought was, let me at them.
Yeah.
All the fear went away. And it was something that I learned that really gave me the confidence that I could answer any question that anybody brought up about what's going on inside them.
Oh, interesting.
And that did it for me. And I've never had fear since. I don't plan out how am I going to start my talk or anything. I just go out on stage and start. And it always unfolds perfectly. So
I really like that, because I've heard other speakers say the same, and that, we tend to learn from our fears and our mistakes and what we overcome. Successes kind of get blurry after a while. We forget how we got there, but you tend to remember those key moments in your life when you had to overcome something. So I think that's great. And I don't want to lose track. Have we covered all 6?
We covered 5.
So what's number 6?
Number 6 was, I was on a panel one day and somebody says, asked me a question, what is the number one thing that you've learned above all else that's been the most beneficial for you in your life?
Oh, good. I had that question for you too.
And I said, learning to let go. Learning to let go. You see, we get programmed. I mentioned earlier the people's relationship to money.
Yes.
There was a fella that I was talking with about a month ago, and he said, I haven't been able to pay my bills on time or fully each month for 25 years. And I said, wow, that's a long time. I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, I'm thinking about cutting my overhead. And I said, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But I said, in 2, maybe 3 months at the outside, you'll be back not being able to pay your bills on time. He said, well, how do you know that? I said, well, you've been doing it for 25 years.
Yeah.
And you've been trying to break that cycle. And I said, you're addicted to it. And I said, that's the problem. It's an emotional addiction. It's a core belief that you have that you will do anything in your power to prove to yourself and the outside world that what you believe is true, even to your detriment.
Yes.
And I said, if somebody doesn't walk you through how to break that cycle, I said, you'll live out the rest of your life not being able to pay your bills on time. So learning to let go it's a critical thing in business, critical, especially if you're an entrepreneur. I mean, it's, for example, people say, well, it's hard to let go. Well, I got this mouse in my hand.
Yep.
Just because it's in my hand does not mean I have to keep it in my hand for the rest of my life.
Sure.
I can put it down. Just because you lost money in the past doesn't mean you have to carry that around for the rest of your life. Just because you had a breakup in a relationship and you don't want it to happen again doesn't mean you have to carry that around for the rest of your life.
Yes.
Just because you had a health challenge or whatever it might be. But if you relate it to entrepreneurship, we have so many failures. They're failings, I guess. Some people fail, but I don't look at it that way. I just look at it, it's something that didn't work, or you approached it incorrectly. It was like all the people I talked to the first year, I approached it incorrectly. I did an infomercial many years back. I spent $750,000 on, and I get a call from Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank, who's now a good friend of mine and actually a business partner. But I'd never met Kevin, and he calls me and congratulated me on the show. And he's the #1 infomercial producer in the country. He said, what a great looking show, man. He said, I just wanted to congratulate. I said, I just watched it. He said, one of the best looking shows I've ever seen. Well, it didn't work. It looked really good.
Looked good, but didn't sell.
So I spent another $50,000 doing a little editing and trying it again. And then I just going, okay, well, it didn't work.
Yeah.
So there's $750,000 down the drain.
Yeah.
Well, I could still be buried in that going, oh my God, if that had just worked. It's just something that didn't work.
Yes.
I got some good footage out of it. So, a little expensive footage, but and got to meet a lot of great people, but that's the key, is the ability to cut the tie.
Not keep that emotional baggage.
All stress.
Yeah.
All stress, in my opinion, comes from trying to control things over which you have no control.
Yeah, so true.
If something doesn't work, you have no control over it. Trying to control an outcome in a sales presentation. The best way to do that is in your presentation, not in trying to control what that person's going to do, but control what you can do.
Yeah.
If it's something you can take action to change and improve the situation, take action. If there's no action to take, let it go, man. Move on. But, we get programmed about everything. And I mentioned that 90% of the people will never make the money that they desire to make, simply because they're programmed and they're in that addictive cycle and they don't know they're in it. So it's like a self-imposed prison that they're trying so hard to break out of. And every time they try to break out of it, one that they don't know they're in, they try to break out of it and fail, it strengthens the cycle. It strengthens the bars on the prison door. So, and it's not that hard to break it. I mean, I spent an hour with somebody in coaching, and typically I get this, I don't need any more sessions. I got it, because
it makes sense now.
If you can get somebody to understand logically what they're doing, and so that they see what they're doing, what cycle they're in, then now it becomes a choice that they do these things, conscious choice.
Yes.
Where before it's an unconscious choice they're doing. Somebody that's habitually late for meetings, you've probably, or any appointment, you've probably seen that. Or
I know these people. Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's a habit. You can count on this person being 15 minutes late.
Mm-hmm.
And once they understand that they're doing it, now it's a conscious choice. They don't even know they're doing it. It's an attention thing.
Yes.
Even though it's negative attention, they still get attention.
It's still attention. Yeah, just becoming aware of some of those things, bringing them from your subconscious to your conscious, can really make all the difference in terms of you being able to control them, just by starting to take note of them.
Well, you mentioned awareness.
Yeah.
Here's the way I look at it. You can be aware that you're fearful. You can be aware that you're broke. You can be aware that you're unsuccessful or whatever. But just awareness alone doesn't do it. You got to go to the next step, and you got to become self-observant. You got to catch yourself doing what you're aware of. If you're habitually an angry person, if you catch yourself being angry and stop and observe yourself being angry, I mean, from a higher level, looking, so, oh, there I am doing this again. I'll challenge you to stay angry. Yeah. Or if you're depressed, observe yourself being depressed, and depression will go away, because you're cutting the tie to that internal dialogue that's automatic.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. And, Jim, I think, you clearly have a wealth of experience, a wealth of stories. I think we could probably go on for several hours on some of these topics, because I love to get into the details on these things. But given we're running up on the top of the hour here, I'd love it if we could just conclude today by sharing with the audience a little bit more about your next projects. You mentioned a couple books. I know you've written a couple during COVID here that are coming out. Where can people find out more about where you'll be online, where you'll be in person, and some of these new books that you've written?
Well, one program I have that's online. It's a 4-month program designed to reprogram your subconscious and your relationship to money.
That's what we're talking about.
That's at crackingtherichcode.com. And I'm also doing a book series that I'm in the 6th volume of that book with Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. And Tony Robbins has endorsed the series as well. So we have, it's a collaborative book series, but it also offers PR, marketing, branding, and lead generation to go along with it. So it's a pretty cool package that Kevin and I put together. But the book is also called Cracking the Rich Code. And the key thing that we've done is we've taken kind of a unique approach that the cover of the book, it has a picture of Kevin Harrington with his notoriety of Shark Tank, and everybody knows either Kevin or Shark Tank, even internationally. And it's got a picture of me as a top 20 success coach, and last year top 50 speaker, not last year, but the year before. And then Tony Robbins and his endorsement with his picture. And we do a different front cover for each of our co-authors. So their picture is right in the center of the book, surrounded by 3 top coaches and speakers.
That's
so
a great idea.
Co-brand with us. I mean, how do you get to go co-brand with Tony or go co-brand with Kevin Harrington?
Oh, it's a great idea.
So it's a cool package. We've got such talented people in it. They're entrepreneurs, they're coaches, they're speakers, they're consultants, people that deal directly with the public. And Kevin and I, our objective is to help people to become a key person of influence in their field of business. Because in today's marketplace, on social media and the internet, if you don't stand out, you get lost. I mean, it's like everybody's your competition, not even people outside your field of business, because everybody's looking to take up space.
It's a lot of noise.
That's what we're doing with that. If anybody's interested in learning more about that, they can just email me at support@jimbritt.com, and I'll get some info to them regarding that if they'd like to maybe apply to be one of the chapters in the book. And so that's that. And then if more about me and my books and programs are at jimbritt.com. That's JIMBRITT.com.
Oh, that's great, Jim. I will make sure that we have all of that linked up in the show notes so that people can see it, find you online. I think that's a great offer. And I really have enjoyed this conversation today. I think you've shared a lot of great wisdom with us. I love the stories, and I look forward to continuing the conversation at a future date and time.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Eric, for having me here. Appreciate it.
Thanks again.